walk through this project. It's I can get a video of it again. The old video works somewhat, but I have updated the spreadsheet, so a few things have changed. So make sure you have this file open. So everybody get this file open. Should open to a page which has some links to the rest of the spreadsheet. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is run the efficient frontier. To do that, you got to define who your client is. So you need to make somebody up. It can be anybody. They have to have some reason for investing. Mostly it's retirement is the most logical thing. Who are they? How old are they? What's their risk tolerance? If you're doing a young person, they're going to have a high risk tolerance. If you're doing an old person, they're going to have a very low risk tolerance. And then you're going to give them a starting portfolio and you're going to give them some constraints. So if you look at the spreadsheet, the second page is the model. The top part of it is the assumptions. You don't have to do anything with that other than your paper just say that you're using these assumptions. So you just give credit to these assumptions. The next section where you're going to be doing all your work is in this green area, which is all you need. The orange section are the actual calculations, which you might want to look at and just see how they work, because it's doing nothing more than using this very, very famous formula in finance. So, so we're just going to focus in on the green section. The first thing you do in the green section is to define your portfolios that your client starts with, and I would make it very undiversified. I'm starting with the 70-30, 70% growth stocks, 30% bonds, or something like that, 60-40. I would recommend you only have 2 asset classes. However, make sure however you start that it's in compliance with your constraints. So you do need to think about your constraints before you start. So what kind of constraints would you use? Well, you can have constraints. The most obvious ones, most people are uptight about high yield bonds, and they don't like high yield being more than maybe 5, 10, 15%. Gold, especially gold itself, gold stocks also, but gold itself, most people don't like more than, say, 5, 10% there. You might want to put a constraint on small cap or emerging. I put a constraint on international, and international, that's 2 cells. So I had to put the constraint over here. The only thing you have to do is make sure whatever you turn in doesn't look like this. You have to change these constraints in some way, all right? So you got to decide what that is, but decide on something, and then you got to use some creative writing for why you did that. You might Google some, what's the max you should allocate to X or Y, and just see what somebody else is saying. These are not uncommon constraints. These are the 2, 10% is a pretty common constraint for high yield and gold. You can put them in, and if you want to, you say want to have at least a minimum of X whatever in something, you can do that as well. But the only reason I say that before you run your client, you want to make sure whatever you do with your client that they're in compliance with your constraints. So don't give your clients 70% developed and 30% bonds and then say the max in developed is 30%. Because if they violate your constraint, it's possible their portfolio is more efficient than your efficient frontier because they're doing something outside of your constraints. Is mine in compliance? Well, 10's the max, I got 0. That looks pretty good. 10's the max, I have 0. 20's the max, I got 0. 40's the max, I have 0. So my client is in compliance. So whatever you put for your client, starting client, if you got a younger client, there's different ways you can do it. If you have a younger client that's way too conservative, maybe he's 70% bonds, and you're going to recommend that he goes much higher risk. Or you have a really old investor that's like 80% stocks, you're going to recommend they come lower. Or maybe as a young investor, he's doing the right thing, he's got 80% in stocks, but he doesn't have well diversified. However you want to define it, you can define it. Once you type that in, make sure it adds up to 100%. And then you go to the model output, and the first thing you do in the model output is come down to B5, and just do Control-Shift down and right, and just get rid of what's there, because you're going to build that from scratch. And then whatever's in line 2 is anything that's in that model page. All right. So right now I'll put our current client in there, 70% large cap growth, 30% bonds. So I'm going to select that, Control-Shift right. You Control-C to copy, And then come down here and right click. And click on that 1, 2, 3 because you want these pasted as values, all right? If you copy and paste it, it's going to paste the formulas, and you don't want the formulas. The two mistakes I see are people who do that, and I also have somehow people get this top line, they copy and paste that as a value, and that completely destroys the formula. So you don't want to do that either. So that defines who your customer is, and that's, you'll see when we actually run the Efficient Frontier, which we're going to do real quickly here. When you run the Efficient Frontier, you're going to see why you're recommending a certain portfolio for your customer. All right, so I'm going to pause it there because you'll need to get your constraints in before we run the Efficient Frontier. So put a little bit of thought in.